Hello, hello. How is everybody doing today? So, please come in and make yourself comfortable. I'm just going to give it a few moments and wait for some others to join us. I just have another I have a really rigged setup here because I don't have an office. And so let's just hope everything goes as planned. So I wanted to have a separate monitor. So I have a phone propped up here to make sure that I can see everybody's comments. Now, I won't be able to see the comments. Well, I'll be able to see your comment, but I won't be able to see your name with the comment. I won't know who it is that's making a comment unless you go to the link above this video, StreamYard, and just put your name in. You don't have to really sign up. You don't have to create an account or anything crazy. They just want your name so that it can appear in the comments so that I can see it. Facebook by itself never lets me see all the comments, so I don't want to be missing anything. And while everybody else is coming in and getting settled, I am going to just create a sacred space, a container. And I'm just going to center myself, and if anybody else would like to center themselves with me. I'm just going to burn some Palo Santo. Take a couple deep breaths. And I do what one of my mentors, Deborah, always tells me, is to take the elevator out of the mind and drop it down into the body, into the heart center. And just bring my consciousness from my mind and my head down here into the heart, into the chest, so that we're occupying our body and not our mind. That leaves us open more so for divine influence, because we're able to read what we get better. It's not our thoughts aren't in the way. So welcome. Thank you so much for coming tonight. And for everybody who's watching the replay, welcome to you too. Please just put your name and email into StreamYard. I believe that's all it asks for. That way we have names with the comments. Please let me know who is here and where you're tuning in from. So where are you in the world? I'm not in any big rush to get started. I just want to make sure that everyone is here before I start saying the important stuff. Okay. My phone keeps timing out. I'm using it to take a look at comments, and it keeps timing out on me. Let's just hope that doesn't keep happening. So welcome. Welcome, everyone. So now that we're settled, I'll get started. So if you are coming here and watching on the replay right now, I would love for you to do a hashtag replay for me. And for everyone who's coming live, I would love if you would go to the link above the live video that you're on right now. Just click out of the video, click on the link above the video, the blue link for StreamYard, and just type your first name in there. That way I at least know what to call you and I know who I'm speaking to. Hi, Beth. I love you too. Thanks so much for joining. So this is my first time doing a training like this. So I'm a little bit nervous, but I know my stuff, so I'm not really worried. So tonight we're going to talk about natural spirituality, and we're going to talk about building a spiritual practice and what the elements are important, what important elements there are in building a spiritual practice. So, Weatherford, Texas. Thanks, Rachel. I'm in Maryland. I'm coming from the Eastern Shore, Maryland, USA. So on the East Coast. We're in the South. We're just below the Mason-Dixon line, so we're not too far south, right below Delaware. And I would love for you to tell me where you are in the world too. And so I wanted to let you guys know that you're not really here to learn anything, okay? And I want you to know that it's not about learning, and it's not about getting information from somebody else. This is more about remembering. This is more about remembering who you are, who you really are. Hi, Mandy. And thanks for coming. Mandy's down in Georgia. I can't wait to travel again, guys, really. So the truth is, who you really are is divine energy. You are really source energy. And your natural state is abundance and joy. That is how we should be naturally. Before we were ever acclimated into school and into society, and before anybody told us what was wrong and what was right or what people expected, before anybody who barely knew themselves told us about ourselves, that's who we are, who we would have naturally been without anybody's opinion, without anybody else giving us any idea of what we should and shouldn't do in the world, right? Our natural state is abundance. Now, humans are provided for by Mother Earth. We did not come here to suffer. We did not come here to experience lack. This is a very abundant, beautiful planet that provides for us. So you came here to enjoy this experience. And you didn't come to struggle or suffer or play small. You came here to expand your soul. There's one constant in the universe that we can count on, and that is change. That change will always happen. The universe is in an ever-expanding, constant state of growth. And so are you. So am I. We all are. If there's one thing that the universe doesn't like, it's stagnation. If we are fighting growth for any reason, then all we're doing is causing ourselves suffering. We're causing resistance when we really just want to be in flow. And so if your soul is not expanding, then you're stagnant in your soul's growth, and your soul isn't doing what it came here to do. The universe doesn't support stagnation because it's in a constant state of growth. And so it'll literally kick us up the backside and create circumstances that will force us to expand our consciousness. And if you can't tell, you can even see these things in today. If you look on the internet, if you look at the news, you'll see things. I opened up Amazon yesterday, and some of the things that are on Amazon maybe a year ago wouldn't be taken seriously, but they're being taken seriously now. And that just shows the growth that we've had. Last night we watched The Help. Amazing. That movie, I cried through the whole thing. I do every time. It's a beautiful movie. If you haven't seen it, you should. But just the difference in the change in consciousness that people had from then to now is just incredible. At least most people, right? Not everybody, but most people. And so I hope that you know that when you expand your consciousness and when you grow and when you step into that next version of yourself, when you heal yourself, you are actually healing the collective. It is not just your work that you're doing, because your vibration and your soul's growth affects everyone, because we are all one. At the core of everything, we are all one, and we are all connected. And so everything that you do affects everybody else in some way, shape, or form, and vice versa. And so there's no way that we can beat ourselves up without having that affect other people. And there's no way that we can do good for ourselves and step out in the world and grow and expand without causing a chain reaction of expansion to go on around us. And so just in the same way that we're inspired by each other, we are also influenced energetically by the force that binds us all together, which is the source energy. And the issue is that, we think sometimes that we can't get out of our current circumstances, or that things look really bad and we're worried. We get worried. We think that we can't do things. We think that we're limited. We are not limited. So we have many reasons to give up. We have many reasons to stay in lack mentality. There's a lot of things our head tells us that stops us from growing. But believe it or not, I had a friend today that made this comment, and I just can't get over it because it's so accurate. He said, it takes more self-love to step into a new version of yourself and to stop playing small and to put yourself out in the open. It takes more self-love to grow and to expand than it does to stay stuck in victim mentality, or just to stay behind just any kind of playing small. Because the more you love yourself, the more you'll be willing to do the things that are a little bit scary. And it is scary. None of us like to be uncomfortable. We just don't. And if we did, then the rest of us, everybody would be growing at a crazy rate, and it wouldn't be as difficult as it is. And it wouldn't take us as long as it does to get out of the situations that we get ourselves into, right? So this is actually, when things are going wrong and we feel like we want to give up, it's too hard, and we feel like we can't do it. This is actually the time that we should be letting go. And we should be letting go and just going for the ride, let go and let God, right? But this is also the time that we fight it the most, right? Because none of us like to be uncomfortable. And we have this idea that we don't understand what's on the other side. And so we are terrified by the idea of not knowing what's happening next, right? And even though you could never guess what's happening next, right? The greatest control freak in the world can never guess what's going to happen next. It's almost as if when we think about what's going to happen next and we get an idea in our mind, then it automatically can't happen exactly in that way that we thought. That's interesting how it seems that way when actually, if we stick to the same vision, it kind of has to happen as long as we keep our vibration in the same place, right? And as long as we're doing the next right thing, and as long as we are not focusing on, staying small, as long as we are taking the risks, then it pays off. And so this is what winds up happening for people. A lot of us stay stuck for a long time, and then the universe doesn't like stagnation, and your soul has to grow. So it's almost as if the universe or divine energies just steps in. Now, usually when divine energy steps in and causes you to move, usually it looks like a disaster and you think it's the end of the world. That's what happened to me. It seemed like the end of the world to me. I felt like my entire life was over. But it was just the beginning. And it was also the greatest thing that could have ever happened to me. It was the best scenario that could have ever happened. And this is what keeps me going, right? Because the situations that keep repeating for us, they lead us to a place where the universe and our guides set us in motion and force us to grow. So tonight we're going to talk about natural spirituality. We're going to talk about the higher self, and we're going to talk about nature. So let's start all the way at the beginning. What is spirituality? So I got a definition by a doctor named Dr. Maya Spencer, and she had an awesome definition of spirituality. And she said, spirituality involves the recognition of a feeling or a sense or belief that there is something greater than myself, something more to being human than just this sensory experience. And that the greater whole of which we are a part of is cosmic and divine in nature. And so there's something better. There's something greater, not better. There's something greater. And not only is it there, but we are part of it. Spirituality is a personal exploration of the unseen world, the one that exists all around us, but it's also a journey inward and to a deeper understanding of ourself and the power of the mind and the imagination. Spirituality is also a connection to our environment and the forces of nature all around us. But what's also at the heart of spirituality is a transcendent idea. The idea that within every one of us, there's something much more, something that most of us haven't even begun to tap into. Something that allows us to create for ourselves solutions to what we call our problems. One of my favorite spiritual teachers of all time, Dr. Wayne Dyer, wrote a book called There's a Spiritual Solution for Every Problem. I couldn't agree with the man more. Every problem in my life that I've ever had has been and could have been solved by a spiritual remedy. There's always been a form of connection, a form of higher connection, a form of tapping into an innate wisdom that is inside of us that we aren't aware of until we become aware. It's one of those things that you look back and you're like, oh my gosh, like, how could I have ever let things go on that long when I had all the answers within me the whole time? It's a very magical feeling. Let me grab some water. And this is what I want to share because I almost died a few times on this journey. And this is the stuff that saved my life. So let's get back to spirituality. Spirituality is simply the idea that there's something bigger than you or me or us. And earth-centered spirituality is honoring the spiritual interconnectedness, I can't speak, of all the beings in life on planet Earth. So it's honoring Gaia or Mother Earth, but it's sometimes like a gender neutral earth spirit or elementals that are sometimes honored in earth spirituality, in earth-centered spiritual traditions. Natural spirituality is honoring the spiritual interconnectedness of not only us and the animals and plants, but also the elements, the earth, the air, the wind, the fire. And throughout time, hold on a second, my thing is going off. I need you to stay there. There we go. So I need to be able to see your comments, except for no one's commenting, but that's okay. I just had to make sure. A wind of change. That's why I worship Kali's a beautiful goddess to be with. So Kali is one of the most interesting goddesses that I've ever gotten into. I like to keep things as simple as possible, especially since for me, it had to be simple. So I won't be talking about any goddesses and I won't be talking about worship, at least not now. I had religious trauma. And so for me, looking at other people's idea of what worship was and what it is in a lot of organized religions turns me off. And so it took me a long time to get to the point where I could honor and worship in the correct way something that was not myself, because it's used as a weapon. That idea of worshiping something outside of yourself and putting it before yourself is toxic. It really is. And it's designed for control. I really believe that. And so I feel that a lot of people on this path, especially at the very beginning, when a lot of people step onto a spiritual path, it's usually from a place of not having a spiritual connection, or at least not a healthy one. And so, like myself, I feel that a lot of people will have to step onto this with even ground, not feeling like they have to honor and venerate something that's higher than them or anything that judges them or that they should feel small around. People shouldn't feel small. You are God. You are the universe experiencing itself. And there's nothing bigger than that. There just isn't anything bigger than that. And so we won't be talking about worship, but we will be talking about how nature is us and we are nature, and how we are all one. And this is where you start. So natural spirituality is a little bit different than what people think earth-based spirituality is. And the reason why is because natural spiritual traditions, like most indigenous traditions, they focus on celestial bodies too. It's not just what's alive here on earth or what's, the elements that are here in this environment, but also the celestial bodies that are out in space and anything in the universe that affects life. It all does, right? So it's all one. And natural spirituality itself is just basically the idea that we're one with nature. And we call it natural because it's adapted to the inherent nature of humans, right? It's the easiest thing for to come to a human being. In fact, it comes so naturally that hunter-gatherers used this as their natural way of being in the world, this spirituality, because it's just what came to them. They didn't have other things outside of them influencing, right? So there was no dogma. This is just what came naturally to the first people. And so since it comes innately for most people without having like any kind of indoctrination or anything like that, then there's no rules, right? So the only rules are the ones that we set for ourselves. So the rules that you set for yourself will be your innate moral code, right? And this is a thing that I talk about often that I feel like I have to mention. The New Age spiritual movement, there's nothing wrong with it. A lot of it is beautiful, but there are some things about it that are dogmatic. And so whether people know it or not, it has an ideology. There's this idea that goes on in popular New Age communities that there is no right thing, that there's no right or wrong, that it's all just is. And it's not true. It is true, but it's not true for us. It's true in the metaphysical sense. So I'm not going to go too deeply into duality here, but they're only half right. So we live in a dual reality, right? Where the natural law of polarity, everything has an opposite, right? Up must have a down, hot must have cold, and so on. You get the point. This leads to the obvious idea that every wrong would have its right, right? And every right will have its wrong. But it's actually not even, hang on one second. This is going crazy. And so just give me one moment, guys. I just need this to stay lit, but it doesn't want to. Okay, nobody commented anyway. Elephant balls. Yeah, no rules. Dogma does suck. I'm not going to lie. Dogma is awful. So I was saying that there's this idea that there is no wrong or right. And that's okay because it's true metaphysically. But it's not true for us. It's not true for humans. It's not true for humans because we are both divine and human. And so therefore, in physical form, we have to abide by the rules of this reality. And the rules of this reality is a dual nature. And so even though there are both, we are bound by the rules. We are bound by the laws. And so we are bound to a morality, and we have that natural reality. That natural morality. We all have an innate sense of right and wrong. There's none of us that don't have, I mean, there are probably some psychopaths that don't, but no normal people don't have this idea of right and wrong. And I think that it's dangerous because it can be used as an excuse for all manner of things that, oh, nothing's really right and nothing's really wrong. Yeah, metaphysically speaking, that's right. Metaphysically speaking, that's 100% right. But God is metaphysical and we're only part God. Does that make sense? We're only part source energy because the rest of us is here in the human body. And so therefore our human has to abide by the human rules. And so I just feel like we need to make sure that we are clear about the morality of right and wrong, and that while we're growing and while we're expanding, that we are careful not to fall into the trap of these ideologies that are popular, and I think it was easy for it to happen. I mean, I definitely did for a little while. And I'd like to remind us all to just go back to center, right? Feel in your body. Does this feel right to me? Does this feel like something that feels correct? Your body will tell you. I often speak of using the body as a pendulum. And so there are plenty of exercises that you can do. One of them is you can say an idea out loud or hold an idea in your mind. And you can close your eyes and see where your body leans. And you can say, so you can ask your body, is this right or left? Is this, is right? Which way is right and which way is wrong? Which way is yes? Which way is no? And if you close your eyes and you ask yourself a question, your body will, it won't be easy for other people to see, but you'll feel it. Your body will just lean to one way or another. And that's your answer. You can use your body as a pendulum. So that's just one trick to find out what your truth is, right? And now there are, every truth has a lie, and every lie has a truth. So that can get complicated, but you don't really have to worry about anybody else's truth. The only truth we really have to worry about is our own, right? That's the most important part, is that we are worried about what works best for us, right? So, in honoring ourselves, that's where we are able to design what works best for us, right? There's no rules. And so we can create our own daily practice without worrying about rules. There are no rules in earth magic. There are no rules really in natural spirituality. The only rule that there is that you shouldn't be harming life and that you should be respecting life, and this is also called animism by a lot of, I guess, neo-pagans, I would say, call it animism. And animism is the idea that everything has a spirit. So earth has a spirit, the rocks have a spirit, trees, plants, and crystals all have their own unique consciousness, and they all have soul. So this is honoring, and that's what namaste means, right? The honoring the soul in me, the consciousness in me honors the consciousness in you, right? So the awareness in me, or the love in me, honors the awareness or the love in you, and that's really all that it means. But because we're flesh and bone, and we're here in this 3D body, then we're bound by the laws of nature. And so we have to understand that duality is very real for all of us while we're in this experience. And so natural law does apply. And that's why the first thing that I taught when I decided to do the lives in the group was natural law, because I thought it was probably the most important foundation to have, because we are bound by it, whether we want to be or not. Whether you believe it or not, it still is. So we know it, it's just one of those things that, we know what's wrong and we know what's right. Now, I feel like that we're trained by society to think a lot of things are wrong, like focusing on ourselves, right? So if you tell a very religious person that you are part God, right, that there's a God in you, that you feel like you're honoring the God in yourself, they will blow a gasket. There's no way that like a lot of people just, they don't understand that kind of thinking, because worshiping to them is like, you know what I mean? It's not a reverence. It's not an interchangeable love. It's not an exchangeable love. It's something that is, I mean, basically, it's something that's basically forced. And you can't force love. That doesn't work. So the energy of the creator flows through us, and we are the creator and the creation. So when we understand natural law well, and we understand that we are intentional creators of our dream, we're all living in the dream together, and it's a collective dream, but yet you have your own dream. And so we are the dreamers dreaming our own dream, and then together we're dreaming our collective dream. That comes from Carlos Ruiz. He wrote the book, The Four Agreements. He says that. He also wrote the book, what is it called? The Mastery of Love. He wrote a bunch of great books, but The Mastery of Love is my favorite. But you guys probably would know the 4 agreements. He talks about us dreaming the dream and how we're just the dreamers dreaming the dream. So to get back on track, there are few, very few, I'd say, spiritual traditions that weren't once dual in nature. So they had a mother and a father, right? They had the god and the goddess. There was male and female gods at one point. And then around 2,000 years ago, along with the rise of Christianity, spiritual teachings were burned, hidden, buried. And then they were edited, translated, retranslated time and time again. And we've been brought up in a time where the keys of true spiritual connection have been hidden from us. They've been hidden, especially for women, because there's a difference between how women would embody spirituality than from a man. We're different. We're portals. We literally can bring life from the non-physical into the physical realm. And so everything for us is a connection through the body. But that's not what traditions teach, because they're focused on men. And so that's why it's important that women are around women, to learn from women, and to heal and grow together, because we have a unique way that just isn't the way men do it. And that's why I have a females group. Not because I share things that men can't see or that they'd even mind. Not the men that I'd have around wouldn't mind. But I want to have a place where women feel comfortable to just come and say and do whatever they want. I think that it really opens us up and frees us up in so many ways that so I struggle with that. Like, should I combine the 2 groups together? And I have so very few men in my audience anyway, but still, it's just one of those things. So in the mainstream, the ideologies, they're basically split between East and West. So it was that way. It's that way now. It was that way back when they had the mystery schools. There's usually 2 general schools of thought. The Western one is that God is an entity that is outside of us, that demands love and that punishes us for being whatever whatever it punishes us for. And so they teach that people should feel ashamed, right? When they have that people should be ashamed for not being how someone else tells you that you need to be, when people are naturally not that way, right? So it goes against your nature. And then the funny thing is, then they have the nerve to act surprised when people can't live up to it. That's the part that kills me. But because of this, people spend their entire lives worshiping something outside of themselves, working towards an afterlife. So a lot of people, not all, of course, but a lot of people will spend a lot of time working towards what happens when they leave here, and they don't really live. And that's not good. We're here in a physical body for a reason, right? So the same thing happens in the Eastern teachings too. The Eastern teachings teaches it a little bit different. They teach that God is inside, not outside, and that God can be reached from within. And they're not wrong, but I believe their teachings are a little bit misunderstood. Sometimes they assert that in order to be fully connected to the divine or to be fully enlightened, that one must transcend the physical experience, right? Well, or the ego. We have an ego for a reason. Now, I'm not saying that we shouldn't also get over trauma, but transcending the ego is also something entirely different than what people, I think, believe. So they say the spiritual journey is one of ascension. It's one of enlightenment, and the universe is in us, and it's in a constant state of expansion, like we said, and we're constantly evolving, right? Including our consciousness. So their definition of enlightenment in a lot of ways, whether it's written this way or they just kind of comes off this way, it's the idea that the physical identity kind of morphs into the higher self, right? So there's no differentiating between your conscious self and your higher self. Where that all sounds wonderful, it's very hard to do. And not even the yogis do it and still be human beings functioning in the world like normal people. They just don't. Most of them sit in the Himalayas and they meditate for hours and hours and don't speak for days and days. That's not really something that we can all do. It's not for everyone, you know? So the point is that we don't need to have this crazy spiritual practice where we are, you know, totally trying to transcend our now reality in order to feel connected. We don't have to bypass our human in order to experience the divine. And that's entirely the point. So you have your body is the one thing that connects you and the divine. And that is your medium. So we use the body as a guide. The body helps us to be able to receive the messages. A lot of things we don't realize how much the body helps us to speak to the divine, because most of us, our consciousness is not normally in our body. Trauma has us pull our consciousness out of our body. A lot of experiences do. Childbirth does it for a lot of people. Pain, any kind of suffering, especially like sexual trauma for a woman. You totally leave your body. And yeah, your consciousness, of course, is in your body at some point or another. But we lose that connection to our physical body. A lot of us, unless we do intentionally heal it, a lot of us can't even feel our own womb space. And so that's something to be aware of too. The body is really important for our spiritual journey. I'm not sure about for men, but it is for women. And so wanting to reach a state of enlightenment is a beautiful thing. And I'm sure that it's an amazing journey for people that want to do that. But it's not for everyone, and it doesn't have to be. And in many ways, I feel like, and I've heard people say, not all the time, but in some cases, these people are not really trying to transcend their consciousness as much as they're trying to escape human life, if that makes sense. Now, I wouldn't say that's true about everybody by a long shot, but I'm sure that there are cases where it's a spiritual bypass. I mean, even Christ only spent 40 days in the desert, you know, away from civilization, and then he came back. So the point is that we're all here for a reason. And in an attempt to hide ourselves away and transcend the ego, it's just not practical if we want to live a daily life the way we do. And so spiritual retreats and fasting and meditating and even psychedelic experiences are all fantastic and awesome experimental spiritual tools that are great to use. But we also have bodies for a reason, you know, and the purpose of your body is directly related to your will. There is no set in stone specific purpose assigned for us that we know of, right? But there's not one that we have to fulfill either. Does that make sense? We kind of fulfill our purpose just by being here. Like I was saying earlier in the beginning, that you have more of effect on the world around you than you think you do. And so just by living your life and being who you are and being the compassionate, loving person and being in any kind of service to others, even if it's just kindness, you are fulfilling your purpose. And you're fulfilling your purpose every day with the decisions that you make in your daily life. Just by being yourself. So you choose what your purpose is. We choose our purpose. We get to decide. I really do think that some of it is written in advance and that we chose it before we got here, and some of it we can't change. But to a point, we do have our own free will, just like to a point we're creators and we don't have control over all of the creation. It's the same thing. Now, I do think the things that call to us are good indicators of what our calling is, right? So, and some of us, there's a lot of things that we're drawn to and attracted to. That's one thing that I suffered through in the beginning. When you go to treatment for alcohol or drugs, one of the things that they do is they have you do group things, and they ask you questions like, what's your favorite color? Who's your favorite celebrity? What's your favorite this, your favorite that? And the funny thing is that I sat there thinking there was something wrong with me because I couldn't decide. I was like, oh man, I don't even know myself. But now I know myself, and I still don't have a favorite color. Why do I have to pick one? I don't have to pick one. We can like everything. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with that. You will know the things that are your real purpose by the things that you will actually do the uncomfortable things for, if that makes sense. It is not comfortable for me to put myself out there the way I have been. It's really not. But I'm doing it anyway because I really feel that this is my purpose. It will fall in your lap if it hasn't already fallen in your lap. I think that our choices also dictate the kind of support that we get from the non-physical and the kind of support and opportunities that we make available for ourselves and that we're open to. So it's just about insight, right? And challenging the perceptions that we have of the world around us and ourselves. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I know that I want to feel as if I've served a purpose greater than myself. And I would imagine that if you're here, you feel the same way, that you want to feel like that you were important and pivotal to the people whose lives that you touch, right? And we all want to leave a legacy behind when we leave, and we all want to be able to say that we lived to the fullest, right? And not have regrets. And that's why this kind of spirituality that we live by, that I live by, that Michael lives by, is such a gift, because it's all about having it both ways. Because we're both physical and spiritual. We get to have it all. We get to embrace all of it. We stopped looking outside of ourselves for anything other than inspiration or love of others, service, connection, things like this. We are getting back to learning how to connect to the divine in both ways, through the higher self and through nature. And we do want to quiet those triggers and the ego that's in our head that tells us to be afraid of things that we know we shouldn't be afraid of, because that's the way the mind works. It's there for a reason. But transcending that stuff does bring us peace. That's why we're here on a healing journey. And we're getting back to living in alignment with nature, I think, in a lot of ways as a society. And working with healing ourselves and healing the planet too. And so we are on a mission to expand our consciousness. But it's from inside. It's from inside. And we can't bypass our humanity and be whole. That's not how it works. Wholeness is a balance between humanity and divinity. And that's what this is, the spiritual journey. It's a path back to wholeness. That's why they call it, wholesome. That's why they call it holistic, the natural healing, because it's a path back to being whole. Is everybody following? Is everybody doing okay? Does anybody have any questions? Important way to stay rooted. It is important to stay rooted and grounded. It really is, because otherwise we can just fly. I mean, it can be very easily to lose touch. It can be very easy to lose touch if you don't stay grounded. Grounding should absolutely come before transcending. It just does. It just kind of has to. Otherwise, we run the risk of going a little loopy. I mean, and there's nothing wrong with it to a certain extent, but it's one of those things you want to be careful about. Does anybody have any questions? Please put it in the chat if you have any questions. I'm happy to answer them. Just wanted to check in with you guys, see if everybody was okay. So even if you could eliminate that part of you, right, that has an ego, and kind of transcend this human experience, I feel like it would be hard to. I think it would be hard to do that and to live every day, your everyday life. There is an element of presence that I think that we need to have for this experience. And it's learning to understand how the mind works, right? And having full control over our own mind. I mean, that is what a lot of yogis and philosophers speak of, right? Mastering the mind. And when we have control over our own faculties, that's what brings us to greatness, right? It allows us to have compassion and empathy for life, but at the same time transcend our fear and transcend the uncomfortable part of getting around our humanness, right? Because we're taught to pretend that it's not there, and it is. There's nothing we can do about that, you know? So I do believe that enlightenment really is all about balance with nature, and it's really just the fact that we are human and divine, and relaxing into it. And so, like I said within the beginning, that abundance is our birthright. I think that enlightenment is too our birthright. I think that we were born to have abundance and joy, and that's who we were and how we were and how we would have been before we were acclimated into society. And I feel like this journey is about getting back to that, right? In the beginning of our life, we get indoctrinated, and then in the second half of our life, we kind of walk back through into, we walk ourselves back home, and we walk each other home. And so it's a baseline. Does that make sense? It's a baseline for us. And I'd love to see us all get back to that point. The baseline state of abundance and joy. And I do think that we're programmed to believe that that's not what we should have. But I think it is. I think it is what we should have. And I think it's what we all deserve. Oh, don't be frazzled. You can come back, Rachel, and watch the replay. It'll be here until at least Saturday. I'm not taking it down anytime soon. So if you're tired, then, feel free to just come back and watch the replay. I don't want anybody else to be confused and, uncomfortable in any way. So yeah, it's a journey back home to ourselves. That's what this is all about. And it's not about, gaining powers. It's about figuring out what we should have been aware of in the first place, if that makes sense. So I don't feel like we're trying to become godlike, but I do believe that we have intuitive gifts. And I know for a fact that they can be tapped into because I've done it myself. And I believe that we are many creators, and I've seen the law of attraction work. I've made it work for myself. I've seen manifestation happen in real time. But I think that the way to do this is not to transcend anything, but to do it in balance and in alignment with the truth of who we are and who we came here to be in the first place. And that's where the magic happens, right? In not denying yourself of your humanness and not beating yourself up for having a negative thought. Like, that's ridiculous. Of course you're going to have negative thoughts. Most of us can't control, even if you're good at controlling your mind, you're going to sometimes have thoughts that don't reflect, what you want to create in life. But as long as you don't get stuck there, you should be fine. It's not necessary to ignore the suffering and the obvious things that are going on in the world that we would love to fix. But we also have to realize that it's also divine, because unfortunately we are part God and part human. Like I said, that's our divinity, is that the laws of metaphysics apply to us too. And so it is all just the universe trying to be complete and whole and bring itself back into balance. We only have to be responsible for our shit, not for anybody else's, and this is just like an introduction. On day 3, we are going to get into intuition big time. And we're going to go over a lot of different things about intuition. I have taken a couple really nice deep dives with some teachers that were very knowledgeable, and I would love to share some of that. And so we're going to talk a little bit about connecting to the higher self. And I think that a lot of reconnecting with the higher self happens when we're able to calm our nervous system, right? So we're able to stay relaxed and not have all that cortisol, the stress hormone, rushing through our bodies. I think that being in that fight flight state that society wants us to be in, and being in that consumerist state, stops us in a lot of ways from achieving an understanding of the natural world and how it works. But when we do, then we can see clearly how our thoughts and creation and our actions create reality. It's not hard to see. And you begin to shed light on all the falsehoods. Once you have that connection, then you can see, it's pretty easy to see what is real and what isn't. And you learn to listen to your own soul over anything else that's outside of you. And you begin to unlearn all of the things that you learned that were wrong in the first place. Like I said, other people's ideas of what you are and what you aren't. And then you get back to the truth of who you really are. And it's tough. And I don't think that most of us get to do it 100%. It's hard to get back to that person that we were before we were acclimated into society. But the first step is realizing that you're a never-ending state of consciousness, and that it's constantly trying to get back to balance. And that is what being in flow with nature is, right? The more that you understand nature, the nature of your reality, and how what your powers are and what they aren't, what you have control over and what you don't, then you start to work with the flow of nature, because you let go of the things that you can't control, and you make changes and get uncomfortable to change the things that you can. And so the path of least resistance is the goal, right? So if we have to, let me try to explain this. If we strive to achieve something, then there's nothing wrong with that. But we also have to make sure that we're allowing. Like a state of enlightenment is not something that you can achieve. It's not something that you go hunt for or look for. It's not something that you do. It's something that you allow. And so I really feel like in our bustle and hustle society that we don't really understand the state of receptivity, of being receptive. I mean, we even shoot down compliments when people compliment us, right? We push away anything that's, that's tough to receive. And I think that getting back into a state of receiving is also going to be really important going forward. If you try too hard in meditation or using the law of attraction or anything of the sort, then you're just going to be pushing it further away, because you're creating resistance. And so we create momentum when we stay in flow and stay in alignment. And along this path, I found something that I can say that it seems like all great spiritual masters seem to agree on. And it is, and this is what Wayne Dyer says in that book, that the root of all human pain is the illusion that we're separate from source. However, perhaps even more than being separate from source is that a simple recognition that I'm not source, that I am isolated, or I am disconnected, or, all of us, that we are isolated and disconnected, when really there is no you and me. There is no other. There's only self. And by extension, we feel disconnected from everything around us. And it leads to us not respecting the creation around us. Look at the way we treat animals and the planet, feeling disconnected from it and alienating it, and not relating to it in the same way we would relate to ourselves, has really caused us to become so disconnected. And you can also see it in humans too. When people dehumanize any kind of person, like, certain type of people, a certain race of people, a certain, whatever. When we dehumanize, other people, the same thing happens where we wind up abusing them in some way, shape, or form. And it happens with nature. It happens all around us. So everything outside of ourselves, when we feel disconnected and we recognize that disconnection, it becomes an object for use. And that's why I think people get confused about with money. Money is not the root of all evil. Money is a tool. And because we feel so disconnected from the energy around us and the nature of who we are, we don't feel like we have control over that tool, but we do. And so most things, it's a tool that can be used for good or bad. And you're going to see both. When you have something that's neutral, you're going to see both. There are people out there using the laws of nature to do not so great things. And the opposite, exists. So I feel like cultivating a natural spirituality, like a grounded form of spirituality, is to recognize the idea that we're never separate, and we've never been separate from source, and that we're not separate from each other, and we're not separate from the earth or anything else that's around us. And so we belong to creation itself, and we're mini creators. And we have to keep reminding ourselves of that, that we do have control. Quite a bit of control, not full control, but quite a bit of control over our circumstances in life. And a significant barrier, I think, to forming or cultivating this spirituality, a grounded spiritual practice, is dualistic thinking, is knowing that, being aware of dualistic thinking, either or, black or white, self and other, this or that. It's a very binary way of viewing the world with only two options. It's either it's not a wholly bad idea. It's not a bad way of thinking. And it's not an incorrect way of thinking. It's just, in a world of categories and labels and comparisons, we need them in order to understand. We need concepts to understand. But the problem arises when we introduce this way of thinking to how we think about the creator, and how we think about each other, and how we think about nature. And so that just gives us a disconnect. And so when I think about forming a grounded form of spirituality, and I think about this, we often put things like the earth or flesh or matter into a category that we consider maybe less than what would be spiritual or what would be divine. And that anything that's spiritual is higher, and anything that's human is lower. And that's just something that we want to be careful about, because it can lead to the lower things don't matter as much, whereas they matter just as much. In a world of balance, they matter just as much. And so they're each equally important. We just have to be aware of that. That's just something that I think is important. I think that the first step to reclaiming a more positive view of the relationship between us and our human and our divinity, is truly experiencing oneness on a deeper level. Being grounded and reminding ourselves of our humanity while cultivating a daily practice is good for us, and it's good for our spirituality, and it's good for our behaviors, right? So we feel connected to things, and we treat them better when we feel connected to them. And so that's where ritual comes in, right? I feel like adopting a more ritualistic practice in our spirituality helps us to stay focused on the physical and the divine at the same time, right? So because both are important. And so when we are grounded and we use tools and we use plants and we use energy that from the world around us, we are using those things as tools to celebrate spirituality. And in that way, we become aware of and we embrace the physical presence of source energy in every part of creation. And that's what's so wonderful about ritual. We use in plant life, animal life, mineral life, all those things can be used in a ritual. Hopefully we're not sacrificing animals. That's not something, of course, that I would believe in, or I don't think that most people do. But I think it's important because ritualistic spirituality, I think, is great. It's important for building an intentional practice. And all a ritual really is repeating actions that help you to focus on cultivating your relationship with nature, and all life on earth. They represent something for us. So they have correspondences. They mean something. Their properties represent something that we're trying to convey. And we don't recognize one being over another when it comes to natural spirituality. Not my brand of natural spirituality, and not most brands. Some would have the male and the female, but most natural spiritual practices don't necessarily have a hierarchy where anything's greater than the other, or anybody is more chosen or more holy than any other being on the planet. When you have an experience, whether it comes naturally, or you do it through meditation, or you do it through a hallucinogenic experience, when you experience that oneness, after that, you will see the divine and the holy in everything and everyone. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. And that's the thing that I think most people have a fit about, but it doesn't mean what they think it means. It doesn't mean we're all big-headed and egocentric and self-important. It doesn't mean that we think we're better than everyone. It really actually means that we'd recognize it in others too, just as much as we see it in ourselves. And similarly, I think that the ancient pagan belief of animism is very similar. Like I said, it's a philosophy that views everything indwelling or spirit or soul. And that includes, I think, rocks and water and plants and fire and all those things. It includes it all. And it says that it has a soul, that it has its own form of consciousness, and that it's aware, it has its own awareness. And that's the foundation of shamanism. And it has, I think, for a long time been thought to be the oldest form of religion, I think, on the planet. At least I think most people consider that. From the reading that I've done, that's what I've gathered. And I think that when people feel more connected to nature, that they tend to have a happier life. And I'm sure that a lot of you have experienced this. Have you ever experienced, say, at the top of a mountain or on the beach or on the desert, this in expansive spaces in nature, we're able to gain a sense of perspective of things in their right place, right? Everything falls into place. Something similar, I believe, happens to gardeners in their own backyards, and for cooks in their kitchens. For me, definitely, I garden, and I'm a kitchen witch. When you're working closely with nature, I think there's three main places to have this connection. One is in the wilderness and in the woods, or on the beach. Another one is in the garden, and another one is in the kitchen, the things that we cook with, the plants that we cook with. And I think that being close to nature in this way prompts this a deeper awareness of God's presence, right? Of the Creator's presence. And I guess ultimately a connection with the source of all creation, right? Us healing that feeling, that abandonment issue, right? That we all have innately. And so maybe you've had that experience, right? That you've been on a walk or a hike and the sun is just warming your skin and you were just taking in the environment, or you reach a mountaintop and you're in total awe of the view, right? And the awe of the view, it's almost as if the nature around you is revealing its relationship to the divine, and that it's showing you that it is God, right? And that it's seeking a connection with you while you're seeking a connection with it. And it doesn't require any dogma. And it provides the perfect sacred space, being out in nature, even if it's an herb garden in your kitchen, even if it's just a little courtyard, even if it's just weekend trips, however it is that you can experience that. And it's the magic that we share. I think that feeling is a magic that we get, that oneness, that feeling of connection that we get while we're in nature, that we share with our families and we share with our friends and our acquaintances. And that's where we fill ourselves up so that we can heal and get healthy. And I think it's the shared connection of this. If you haven't noticed, a lot of people do this when they go out, go hiking together or go kayaking together, or people go to the beach for vacation or to the mountains for vacation. And this is a shared experience that I think is a key to spirituality. And I think that we need this we need it for ourselves, but we also need it to be of service in the world. It's the shared connection that's the key to a powerful spiritual experience, is being able to share it with other humans. But it's also satisfying to share that experience with nature. And I feel like if we can move beyond our individual dream that we're dreaming and think about the shared dream that we're all creating together, then the religion, the spirituality of the land around us, and the spirituality of nature and the wilderness can become kind of like a lighthouse, or a beacon, for us to have a sense of belonging here and feel like maybe we weren't just left behind, belonging to, the beauty that's around us, and it gives us a sense of purpose and a meaning to life. And I think that this is the very power that transforms us. And I also believe that this is the energy that we can use to save the world. How's everybody doing? I'm going to probably go a little bit longer than I expected. Maybe not. We'll see. I hope everybody's doing okay. Comment and let me know if you're okay or if you're not. Please drop any questions if you have any. If I can't get them to them tonight, I will absolutely answer them later. So let's talk about the higher self for a minute. What do you think? The higher self is the most awesome. The higher self is the most expansive part of us. It's the most expansive part of you. Awesome. I'm glad you're right here with me. That's great. It's nice to keep me on track knowing that other people are following and I'm not just rambling on, right? So the non-physical part of us is the most expansive part of us. It is the observer in your mind. Did you ever sit and think, like, who's thinking my thoughts? Because, like, if you think that, what's my next thought going to be? And then you sit quietly. A thought won't pop in your head. You don't know what your next thought's going to be. Those things are on autopilot. You're not thinking them consciously. So your higher self is that being that's there, that awareness that's there inside of you that observes with no judgment, never has any judgment, right? It's the part of you that knows things sometimes without any logical reason to know things. It's that part of you that feels the ambience change in a room after an argument, or that part of you that just kind of knows that something's dangerous, without even, any kind of outward reason for there to be. It's the part of you that knows everything's going to be okay, even when it doesn't look like it in the moment. It's the part of you that's infinite and immortal, the part of you that lives on after you leave here, after you leave this body. And I believe that it knows all, even if we don't know all in our human. And it may not be able to tell us all because we may not be able to know that or comprehend it here now. But you can, I believe, all of us can access quite a bit of that information. And because we are both human and divine, and I think that we can connect to both at the same time. And I think that that's why we forget when we come here in this experience. That's why I think we have that whole forgetting our previous lives and our forgetting where we come from. Because I think that's the only way that the divine, the creator through us can have a legitimate experience. Because if it knows, if it knows everything while it's in you, then the experiences wouldn't be the same, right? They wouldn't be the same kind of experiences if we knew. And so I think that in a way, source energy kind of comes into a body just to have an experience and just to experience something besides what itself for a little while. And I think that all of us are connected to source energy, which is just pure light. Pure light is information, and it's a life force energy. I think that part of our souls are located in the body, and the rest of our awareness is somewhere else, experiencing different lives, maybe having different experiences, maybe learning lessons. But quantum physics, I'm going to mention here, we'll go further into it later. Quantum physics, I call it the science of spirituality. It tells us that time isn't linear, right? And that everything's happening all at once. The only reason why we're not aware of this, I believe, is because we had to forget to come here. It's that to be an individual. And so the rest of our consciousness is always available to us to communicate with. We can tap into it at any time. We're going to do an exercise on this on day 3. So make sure you come back. We're going to do a quantum meditation where we connect with ourselves in the future. So you can never be disconnected from your higher self. Your higher self has a bird's eye view of the bigger picture, the things that happened before, the story of your soul, and the things that come later, and things that you cannot see, that you probably even agreed upon before you got here, right? And this part of you has access to infinite intelligence, like I said. And I think that we experience it all, that we can tap into anything in space and time. And that we're truly connected to all of the lives that we have and will and are living simultaneously. And so I think that we can teach ourselves how to connect to this knowledge and to this wisdom. And I think that that's part of the point of doing this, is that learning that our higher self is the consciousness that comes directly from source, and that every version of us that can or ever has existed is existing now. And that means that we can access it right now, whenever we want. And because of this, in the context of manifestation, because we talk about manifesting so much, I think that we don't have everything we want. When we don't have everything we want, it's not because it's not available for us. I think it's because we don't know how to match the vibration of it. We don't know how to show up in everyday life as if we have everything we desire, because we never had it before. And we don't know what that's like yet. So we can tap into, I think, a version of us, and I've done this in the past, a version of us that has experienced it, right? And that does live the life, or maybe already has lived the life that we dream of, or has what we want. And so that's something that we're going to get into on day 3. After we talk about intuition, we're going to go through a visualization where we're going to tap into our future self. We're going to think of the thing that we want the most, or the situation that we want the most. And we're going to tap into that future self that's actually living that life right now. And we are going to get information from them. We're going to get inspiration from them. We're going to focus on how they look, how they act, how they think. And we can learn a lot from that, how to show up as if we are the version of ourselves that already has everything we've ever wanted. I think that there's a magic to this. That's the key to quantum spirituality, is that quantum really just, it means the tiny little parts, like at the core of everything that exists, is an intelligence that's connected to everything else. And so because we can tap into this, we can actually tap into our dreams, the things that we dream of. I think we can peek in on how things happen, and maybe how to even solve problems that we weren't able to solve before. And we can figure out the best way to show up in this life as if we have everything we want, so that we can work on manifesting what we do want and showing up in life as if we already have it. I think that we can figure out, how to get around obstacles in this way. I think that we can tap into knowledge that they have in the future, our future self. And I think that our souls have our souls have the ability to connect to all the cosmos through the creator and through source energy. And to say that we are connecting to our higher self feels kind of silly because we can't disconnect from it. We never were disconnected from it. So really, this is just, I think that we ignored it for so long, right? And we weren't aware of it for so long that the voice just got so tiny and so quiet that we just don't hear it any longer, right? And so what we have to do is zero in on that voice and try to work with paying attention to it so that it can get louder and louder. And the more we practice paying attention to that little voice within ourselves, the more we are able to quiet the mind, the thinking conscious mind. I think that the easier it will be to be able to hear that. So I think that we really all do want to work on building that stronger connection, or we wouldn't be here. And then I think that practicing our intuitive abilities are going to get us to get us there. And I think that we'll get louder and louder the more that we practice. And I'm sorry, the cat is totally distracting me right now. He decided he wanted to be in here while I did this. And now he wants to get out, but I'm not getting up to let him out. So, yeah, we're going to tap back into the things that we ignored for so long. And we're going to go much deeper into intuition on day 3. And I just wanted to highlight, I have a PDF for you guys to commune with nature. It's instructions. It's a 5-step framework on how to begin to commune with nature. And so I'm just going to go over a couple key factors that we want to think about when we're connecting to our higher self. One is spending time in silence. When we have an intuitive hit, we want to say it out loud or write it down because that brings it into the real world. If we have an intuitive thought or an inspiration and we don't get it out, we're going to forget it. It just disappears. We have to write them down or say it out loud. If you don't have any way to write it down, say it out loud. That makes it real. Another thing is trusting. We want to trust what we get, and we want to trust that it's correct, no matter how silly it sounds. We want to surrender. We want to surrender into trusting our intuition, whether or not we think that it makes sense, for the simple reason that that's what makes it louder. It might, even if it doesn't make sense, if you act on it and you trust in it, it'll get louder and louder. And then and the funny thing is, when you get to the end of that, you turn around and you see how it did make perfect sense. It just, you couldn't see it from the point of view that you were at the time. Ask a lot of questions. Ask for clarity. Ask for help. And then sit quietly and just receive. Practice receiving. Not asking, not worshiping, not thinking, but just receiving. Being open-minded, right? Being open-minded to changing our ideas, changing our perceptions of the world. Nurturing creativity, dance, move, yoga, play an instrument, paint, play, have fun. You'll find, I think, that when you're being creative is probably the time that you'll feel the closest to your intuition. The closest to your higher self. Be consistent. Keep coming back and doing it over and over again. It requires practice. We all can tap into our intuition. We all have psychic powers. It's just that not many of us are willing to put in the hard work. I just want to talk about nature for a minute and then we'll go. And I will drop a PDF for you guys in the group on how to attune with nature. So real quick, I think that practitioners of natural magic, natural spirituality, including native cultures and people who practice witchcraft. The goal is to work in harmony with nature, right? And this can be spirits of land, spirits of the land. It could be earth, air, fire, and water, the elements, plant medicine, kitchen witchery, elemental magic. That's just a couple of ways. There's a lot of ways. And one of the most important things about natural spirituality is to keep consistently coming back to your relationship with nature and your understanding of nature. Maintaining contact with your physical environment is, I think, crucial to a meaningful practice. Because if you lose touch with your environment, then you lose touch with the one thing that connects you to your natural surroundings. And that's the whole point of it, right? Also being in the now, mindfulness, right? Your current state of your environment, being aware of the energy that moves through it, what it feels like normally, right? So that way you can detect the subtle changes. And you'll start to, the more you practice, you'll start to understand that everything has a baseline energy. And then once you attune yourself to that, you'll really be able to notice the changes, even if something you can't notice it with your five senses. And this also is your own baseline state, right? This includes your baseline state and how your state changes, your vibration changes around certain people, watching certain things, taking in some kinds of content, all of these things that we need to be aware of. I will give you guys another handout on day 3. Actually, I might even pop it in the group tomorrow if I have time to make it. That I'll put all this down for you guys because I'm kind of blowing through it. I took my time and I don't want to keep you guys all night. So yeah, that's pretty much what we just talked about is the path of the natural spiritualist, the green witch, the earth stewardess. Getting to know your corner of the universe is important. Remembering that energy is in a constant state of emotion, of motion, and that it can change, and it can change rather quickly. And so getting a journal is a really good idea, and writing these things down, sensing energy, taking time to sit and connect with the energy of plants, crystals, identifying their qualities and writing them down, a grimoire or a book of shadows. It's a good idea to start something like that. Yeah. And so keeping a record's a good idea, because it's really hard, I think, sometimes to remember it all, but it's also really hard to notice a change if you don't write it down, because it's not something that we can do as much as I think that native cultures did, in the way that our society is now. You know, we all have to go to work and some of us are in cities, and I think writing it down is going to be really important. It also makes it real. Anything that you put on paper or say out loud is going to bring it into reality. It's going to make it more real for you. And then it'll be easier to remember too. Yeah. Making an altar is a good idea. It doesn't have to be anything fantastic. It can just be an area that's a sacred place. You can put something that represents earth, air, fire, and water on it. Great idea. You can put like a little cup with water in it. You can put a feather or incense for air. You can put, this cat is going bonkers. He wants to get out of here. Anyway. So yeah, anything that, represents the elements. You can use a candle for fire. You can use, what do we not do? Water, air, fire, earth. You can put sand or dirt or a plant. Hold on one second. I'm going to let him out because he's driving me bonkers. All right, Kingston. Next time I won't be doing that with the cat in here. Anyways, and just write down ideas that you have for what you think you want to work with. Do you think you'll want to work with crystals or herbs or incense or oils? It's a good idea to just get an idea. And then the last thing is a regular grounding exercise. Grounding. We talked a lot about it. I don't need to go on about it anymore. But going out in nature barefoot, great idea. I have a grounding meditation. I think I accidentally took it down. I'm going to put it back up in the guide section of the community group. You're welcome to use that whenever you like. I also have it written out, and it was in the community group, but I think I deleted it accidentally the other day. I'll make sure I get that back up in there, the grounding and centering. That way you guys can, try to remind yourselves to work on that. I have so much more information. It's not even funny. There's so much more I'd like to share. Michael will be with you guys tomorrow. You're not going to see me tomorrow night. Tomorrow night, Michael will be here at 7:30, and he's going to talk about the mind, body, spirit complex. And he's going to talk a little bit more about duality, and he will talk a little bit more about metaphysics. But yes. And then on Wednesday, I'll be back at 7:30. We'll both be here on Wednesday off and on. We're going to switch back and forth, and we're going to talk about intuition, and we're going to practice intuition a little bit. I'm going to give you guys some hints on like some ideas of how to find your intuitive strength. And we're going to do that quantum meditation, visualization. So thank you guys so much for joining me. I really appreciate it. You guys are all amazing. And I'm just so excited. I don't even think I'm going to be able to sleep now. You guys are amazing. Have a wonderful night. And I will see you guys on Wednesday. Namaste.